She broke the handcuffs without hesitation. In the middle of a courtroom evacuation, as red lights flashed and sirens screamed, a woman in an orange jumpsuit dropped a federal officer to the ground, disarmed him, and exposed him as a double agent, right there in front of stunned deputies, reporters, and a judge. And just minutes later, a general walked in with sealed documents, and everything changed. But how did she get there? And why did a quiet Marine veteran running a rural shooting range play a key role in what turned out to be a national security operation? If you love true stories filled with suspense, silent heroes, and twists you'll never see coming, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. And be sure to tap the bell icon so you won't miss what comes next. Now let's begin the story of Ray Boone in the shadows of Lane 12. The sun had barely crested over the snow-dusted peaks of the Colorado Rockies, casting a pale golden light across the frozen earth. At 6:14 a.m., the air at Pine Hollow firing range was sharp enough to sting the lungs, the kind of cold that cuts straight through flannel and wool. Fog curled low along the tree line, hugging the ground like a secret. Most days the range didn't see visitors this early, just Ray Boone, the man who'd been unlocking those rusty gates for the last 12 years. At 63, Ray still moved with the precision of the Marine he once was. 22 years in the Corps had carved that into his bones. He knew every echo off the canyon walls, every groove in the gravel path. That morning, something felt different, though he couldn't yet say why. Just after first light, a dark SUV pulled quietly into the lot, tires crunching softly on frost-covered gravel. Ray looked up from the logbook in the shack, squinting through the fog. A woman stepped out, tall, lean, maybe early 40s. She wore a worn military-style jacket, jeans tucked into old hiking boots, and a navy ball cap pulled low over her brow. Her face was mostly hidden, but her posture caught Ray's eye right away. Not stiff, not aggressive, just controlled, deliberate. She carried a long black case, gun case no doubt, but not like the plastic ones weekend shooters brought in for their deer rifles. This one looked custom, too light for armor, too sleek for commercial sale. She moved with quiet confidence toward the farthest shooting lane, bypassing the central lanes like she already knew the layout, like she'd been here before, even if Ray was sure she hadn't. Ray watched from behind the glass of his office, coffee cooling in his hand. He saw her set the case down, open it slowly, methodically. A suppressed bolt-action rifle, long range, high caliber, clearly modified. He'd seen weapons like that overseas, but never in civilian hands. Then she began to shoot. Her first round struck the center of a steel plate at 400 yards. The next two landed dead on at 600. Then, without adjusting the scope, she pivoted to a freestanding silhouette at over 900 yards, barely visible in the morning mist, and struck it with a sound so clean it echoed like a question mark. Ray didn't say a word, he just watched. She reloaded with ease, her breathing steady, 4-count inhale, 3-count hold, exhale on trigger squeeze. Textbook. But what struck him most wasn't her form, it was how she adjusted for wind by instinct, without so much as checking a flag or weather meter. It was the kind of skill you didn't learn from YouTube or a hunting club. It came from years of something else, something quieter, something classified. Ray leaned back in his chair, narrowing his eyes. There was only one thought in his mind. This woman wasn't just a shooter, she was someone trained to survive, and maybe disappear. Ray Boone had seen his share of sharpshooters, some trained, some cocky, and a few who thought they were both. But this woman? She didn't fit into any category he knew. There was something measured in every movement, like her mind was 3 steps ahead of everyone else. And that quiet intensity? It made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. She hadn't spoken a single word. Not a good morning, not a request for target placement, not even a nod of acknowledgement. Just precision, silence, and a kind of focus that didn't belong in a civilian shooting range. Around 7:45 a.m., another regular showed up. Tyler Jenkins, a younger guy, mid-30s, Army Reserve. Decent shot, but loud about it. He took one look at Olivia, lined up for a 1,000-yard target and landing every hit like it was nothing, and his brow furrowed. "Ray," Tyler muttered, approaching the shack. "You see that woman on lane 12? Ray gave a small nod, eyes still fixed through the scope of his binoculars. "She's running a suppressed bolt action with a modified carbon fiber barrel. I've only seen that set up once, in country. That's not something you order from Cabela's. And she's not adjusting for anything, she just knows. You think she's military?" Ray didn't answer right away. He didn't want to jump to conclusions. He'd learned in war and life alike, sometimes the things you think you know are the ones that blindside you hardest. Still, something in his gut didn't sit right. And when a gut like Ray Boone speaks, especially after 2 decades in the sandbox, you listen. "Give me a minute," Ray finally said, picking up the range phone. He didn't call 911. He called a friend, Deputy Mark Calder, someone he trusted from the sheriff's office. Ray asked for discretion. "No lights, no sirens, just a quiet check," he said. "Something about her, I can't explain." 20 minutes later, a patrol cruiser rolled in. 2 local deputies stepped out, boots crunching over gravel. Olivia had just finished reloading. As they approached, she calmly lowered her rifle, stepped back, and kept her hands where they could see them. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, his voice even but cautious, "we're going to need to see some identification and your weapons permit." Olivia didn't flinch. "I don't have them with me," she said, her voice low and composed. "Can you give us your name?" "No," she replied simply. The lead deputy glanced at his partner, then back at her. "Ma'am, we're going to have to take you in until we can verify your identity." "Understood," she said. And just like that, she turned around, placed her hands behind her back, and allowed herself to be cuffed. Ray watched the whole thing from the office window, jaw tightening. There was no resistance, no protest, no shouting about rights or misunderstandings, just quiet compliance. And that, more than anything, set off alarm bells. People who are guilty often argue. People who are innocent usually protest. But someone who goes without a word? That's someone who's trained. As they escorted her past the shack, Ray stepped outside, eyes locked on hers. "You didn't have to go quiet," he said gently, more observation than accusation. Olivia met his gaze, steady and unreadable. "Sometimes silence is safer," she said. That was all. Then she was gone. Later that morning, the deputies emptied her pockets. No phone, no wallet, no credit cards, just a sleek black key card, unmarked, and a weathered piece of paper folded into a square. When they opened it, they found a topographic map of southern Colorado, military style, its corners marked with faint coordinates. Most of the terrain labels had been deliberately smudged out, scratched with graphite or blurred with water. Along one edge of the map, faint numbers had been written in a sequence that looked like grid references or code. They meant nothing to the deputies, but Ray would have recognized them in a heartbeat. She hadn't come to practice. She'd come to test something. That evening, as snow began to dust the empty firing lanes, Ray stood on the porch of the shack, coffee in hand. The range felt colder now, quieter, like something sacred had been disturbed. He didn't know who Olivia Shaw really was. But deep down, he suspected she wasn't just another name waiting for a background check. She was someone. And someone like her didn't just get forgotten. The holding cell at the Clear Ridge County Sheriff's Office hadn't seen much action in recent years. A few rowdy drunks, the occasional small-time thief, sometimes a domestic squabble gone too far. But nothing like this. Nothing like her. Olivia Shaw sat on the steel bench in the center of cell 2, back straight, legs steady, hands resting palm down on her thighs. She hadn't moved in over 30 minutes, save for a subtle shift of her eyes every so often. Watching, measuring. Deputy Calder stood just outside the holding area, arms crossed, trying to make sense of the woman who'd said almost nothing since they brought her in. Her refusal to identify herself wasn't just frustrating, it was unsettling. No fear, no confusion, no anger. Just an eerie calm, like she'd done this before. And maybe she had. He stepped forward, tapping on the bars lightly with a pen. "Miss, listen, I don't know what you're caught up in, But refusing to cooperate is only going to make this harder. You're looking at obstruction, maybe even suspicion of terrorism if we don't get some answers. Silence. She turned her head slightly toward him, not sharply, not defiantly, just enough to acknowledge the sound of his voice. Her expression didn't change. He tried again, this time softer. You got a name? Something we can work with? Even just a town you're from? Still nothing. She wasn't being rude, she wasn't being hostile, she was just holding. Across the room, a booking officer at the computer shook his head in disbelief. Tried running prints through state and federal databases, nothing. Like she doesn't exist. Calder frowned. That's not possible. Everyone's in the system somewhere. Not her, the tech said. Not under this name, not under any alias. System kicked back an error on the federal run, like it got interrupted. Calder leaned in. Interrupted how? Server access cut mid-search. Message popped up saying administrative lockout, level 6 clearance required. Never seen that before. Outside the cell, Calder's gut twisted. A level 6 lockout meant federal firewalls, military, intelligence community, or someone high enough to make people like him look like Boy Scouts. Inside the cell, Olivia blinked once, slow and deliberate, before turning her attention to the high corner of the room where a small, dome-shaped security camera blinked red. She didn't stare. She noted it. She followed the pattern of its rotation, tracked how often the hallway light outside flickered when the guards changed shifts. Every movement, every beep, every sound absorbed and cataloged. She wasn't waiting for a lawyer. She was assessing. She stood up, stretched slowly, and walked the 3 measured steps to the narrow cell window. From there, she had a clean line of sight to the main entrance. 2 exits, 3 cameras, 1 hallway, 1 guard post. That's all she needed to know. She didn't plan on using it, but she wanted to know. In her mind, a schematic was forming. Downstairs in the operations room, Calder picked up the phone and called a contact at the regional FBI office. We got a situation, he said plainly. Unidentified woman, ex-military or something close. No ID, no prints, and now the system's acting like she doesn't exist. I need someone with clearance. Send over the file, the voice on the other end replied. I can't, Calder said. It's locked. There was a pause. Locked by who? That's the thing, he replied, lowering his voice. We don't know. Back upstairs, Olivia had returned to the bench. She now sat with one leg crossed over the other, glancing down at her cuffed hands. She rotated her wrist just slightly, revealing a faint scar just above the bone. A rope burn, old, healed, the kind left from fast roping out of helicopters in full gear, the kind only certain people ever had. One of the rookie deputies noticed and tried to make small talk. That a climbing accident? She looked up with the faintest smile. Something like that, she said. Her voice was even, smooth, almost gentle, and that made it worse, because the more human she seemed, the more dangerous the silence became. She knew what was coming. Ray Boone had called it. She wasn't here by accident. She hadn't made a mistake. She hadn't forgotten her ID. She had chosen this. And somewhere, someone was watching or waiting or both. Down in the comms room, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't from the regional office. The dispatcher answered, listened for a moment, then paled. She handed the phone to the sheriff without a word. The voice on the other end was direct. This is Colonel James Roth with the United States Department of Defense. The woman you're holding is classified under executive protection protocols. Maintain current detainment. Do not engage. A federal team is en route. The sheriff blinked. What team? But the line had already gone dead. The next morning, the courtroom of Clear Ridge County was standing room only. Every bench, every aisle, every space against the back wall was filled. Small-town reporters, curious locals, retired veterans, and more than a few off-duty deputies who wanted to see the mystery woman up close. Word had spread overnight like wind through dry pine. A nameless woman with no ID had been arrested at the local range, and not even the federal fingerprint database could find her. Now she was about to be arraigned, and the town wanted answers. Olivia Shaw was escorted in through the side entrance wearing the standard orange jumpsuit and wrist restraints. Her face showed no panic, no shame, only that same practiced calm she had worn since the moment of her arrest. She took her seat beside a visibly overwhelmed public defender who shuffled papers and whispered rapid instructions she didn't acknowledge. Judge Helen Markham adjusted her reading glasses and peered down at the bench. Court is now in session. Let the record reflect that the defendant has refused to provide identification or statements. We'll proceed with the reading of preliminary charges. And that's when it happened. A piercing, shrill alarm tore through the courtroom. Bomb threat detected. The mechanical voice of the emergency system repeated the phrase as red lights flashed and a siren wailed through the rafters. For 1 second, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. "Everyone out!" the bailiff shouted, pointing toward the emergency exits. Officers began clearing the benches, herding the crowd toward the rear of the courtroom. The judge was quickly escorted through her private door. Reporters dropped cameras and stumbled toward the exits. In the commotion, a K-9 unit handler yelled, "Device located under the bench, row 3. That bench was occupied moments ago by Lieutenant Wade Corbin, a decorated tactical officer assigned to courthouse security. The device was tucked in the shadows below his seat. It looked real, box-shaped, wired, with a small blinking transmitter attached. As officers drew weapons and ordered Corbin to step aside, he hesitated, just half a breath too long. Then his hand drifted toward his jacket. That's when Olivia moved. With no hesitation, no warning, she flexed her wrists outward sharply, and with a small metallic snap, the cuffs fell free. The courtroom hadn't even been fully evacuated. 2 officers turned, stunned, but Olivia was already up, already moving. She crossed 10 feet in 2 seconds, shoulder charging Corbin off balance. He went down hard, reaching for his belt. Olivia kicked the weapon aside before it cleared the holster. Then she dropped to one knee, pinning him with a tactical arm lock so precise and brutal, it made the 2 deputies watching flinch. "Don't move," she ordered. "You're done." The bailiff ran forward, unsure whether to intervene. "Step back," Olivia commanded. "He's not who you think." From the floor, Corbin snarled, "You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," she said coldly. "I should. You burned my team outside Marja. You fed intel to the Calyx Syndicate, and you're going to answer for every name that didn't come home." Silence. The words hit like a slap across the room. Every remaining officer froze. Lieutenant Corbin, a man decorated for bravery in 2 deployments, was now sprawled on the floor under the knee of a woman no one could identify, being accused of treason. And he didn't deny it. Instead, his eyes shifted to the device near the bench. "You never should have come out of cover," he muttered. "And you should have stayed in yours," Olivia replied. 2 deputies approached cautiously, weapons drawn, waiting for a signal. She stepped back, allowing them to take him into custody. "He's wired," she warned. "Vest, front left. Be careful." They turned him over. Sure enough, taped inside his jacket was a thin transmitter pack disguised as a radio. The blinking red light matched the one on the supposed bomb. A tech team soon confirmed it. No explosive material. The device was a signal amplifier, designed not to detonate, but to activate a trace beacon. "This wasn't a bomb," one agent said aloud. "It was a signal to locate someone or something." Olivia turned to the bailiff. "You were never the target, I was. He planted it to broadcast my location, a tracking burst, likely piggybacked off courthouse security feeds. But I triggered a countermeasure before I arrived." The courtroom was still, confused, half evacuated. Judge Markham stepped cautiously back inside through the secured hallway, having been briefed by her security team in the moments that followed. "I'm going to need someone to explain what just happened," she said sternly but evenly. That's when the rear doors opened once more, and a man in a deep Navy Air Force uniform entered, flanked by 2 DoD personnel in plain clothes. He approached the bench, silent as gravity, and handed over a sealed file. Judge Markham read the top page. Her jaw stiffened. Her expression changed. Slowly, she looked up. "You're telling me this woman is Lieutenant Colonel Olivia Shaw?" The general nodded. "Special Operations Group Tier 1. She's been deep undercover for the past 15 months. Her mission parameters were classified. The incident today was part of a coordinated attempt to neutralize her before debrief." The judge sat back, stunned. And she let herself be arrested? Why? Because, Olivia said softly, stepping forward, the mission wasn't finished. We had reason to believe someone inside local law enforcement was compromised. Getting arrested was the only way to flush him out. And it worked. There was no pride in her voice, no ego, just facts. Lieutenant Corbin was feeding intel to a rogue network attempting to compromise domestic defense infrastructure. My capture would have been exploited for both political and tactical leverage. But the trace system we discovered last month gave us an opportunity, one that required me to become the bait. The courtroom had gone quiet again. Even the skeptical reporter stood stunned at the explanation. The general stepped beside her, facing the judge. All charges against Colonel Shaw are formally dismissed. This entire proceeding is now under federal jurisdiction and will be sealed under national security directive. Judge Markham looked between them, then down at the charges on her docket. With a heavy exhale, she tapped her gavel once. All charges dismissed, case sealed, this court stands adjourned. As Olivia stepped back beside the general, several officers, including one of the K-9 handlers, snapped to attention. She was no longer an unnamed suspect. She was a soldier returned from the dark. And her silence had saved more lives than anyone in that room would ever know. For several long seconds, no one in the courtroom moved. The only sound came from the steady whir of a ceiling fan above, spinning as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. But something had, something that would echo through Clear Ridge for years to come. Lieutenant Wade Corbin, now stripped of badge and dignity, had been let out in restraints by federal agents. The device under his seat had been disarmed. The building secured, but the tension in the air remained, heavy, uncertain, waiting for someone to make sense of what had just unfolded. That someone stood quietly at the front of the room, no longer wearing cuffs, no longer anonymous. Her name, finally spoken aloud, carried the weight of thunder. Lieutenant Colonel Olivia Shaw. The general who had entered moments before now stood to her right. A man of few words and unshakable bearing, he opened the sealed file folder and passed a series of documents to Judge Markham. These are orders signed by the Secretary of Defense, he explained. They confirm Lieutenant Colonel Shaw's identity, rank, mission history, and clearance level. She has served as commander of Task Force 7 within the Special Operations Group for the past 4 years. Her most recent assignment was Operation Blind Front, a counterintelligence initiative tasked with identifying and neutralizing embedded threats within domestic infrastructure. Judge Markham read the first page carefully, then the second, then the third. Her eyes widened just slightly as the full picture came into focus. Your Honor, the general continued, the mission required Colonel Shaw to operate without official documentation, electronic identity, or field support. Her arrest was not anticipated, but proved instrumental in exposing a leak embedded in local law enforcement. That leak, he said, nodding toward the doors through which Corbin had been taken, has now been contained. Judge Markham set the papers down gently and folded her hands. Lieutenant Colonel Shaw, she said, her voice steady, you've sat before this court in silence. You've been processed like a suspect, shackled like a criminal, and doubted by every officer in this building. But I now understand that silence was not a refusal. It was a form of service. Olivia met her gaze, shoulders square, hands folded in front of her. There was no smugness in her expression, no satisfaction, only clarity, discipline, poise. On behalf of this court, the judge continued, I extend both my apology and my gratitude. She reached for the gavel. All charges are hereby dismissed. This case is closed and sealed under federal directive. Colonel Shaw, you are free to go. The gavel struck wood with a solemn crack. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a curtain dropping on the final act of a drama that had taken everyone by surprise. As Olivia turned to leave, a quiet shift rippled through the room. Several veterans in the gallery, men who had fought in Vietnam, Desert Storm, and Fallujah, rose to their feet instinctively. A few removed their hats. One elderly man near the aisle, his jacket decorated with a faded 101st Airborne patch, placed his hand over his heart. Outside the courtroom doors, more agents were waiting, plainclothes, clean-cut, discreet. One opened the rear exit for Olivia and the general as they passed. But before stepping through, she paused. She turned to the room that had once looked at her with suspicion. "I didn't expect thanks," she said quietly, voice clear and composed. "I didn't come here to be recognized. I came to finish what others couldn't." Then she looked directly at Ray Boone, who had watched everything from the back corner, silent as a stone. "I didn't forget your call," she added. "You did the right thing." Ray nodded, not trusting his voice just yet. The courtroom watched her disappear through the doors, escorted but unguarded, respected rather than restrained. And in that moment, Olivia Shaw was no longer a prisoner, no longer a mystery. She was a reminder that real heroes don't always arrive in headlines, and that sometimes the ones who say the least are the ones who've done the most. 2 weeks later, Ray Boone stood on the steps of the Pentagon in his best suit, the tie stiff around his neck, his polished boots clicking faintly against the stone. He had never expected to be here, not at his age, not after everything. A retired Marine, long out of the game, now owner of a quiet shooting range in the mountains. He had built a life of peace, routine, solitude. But something had shifted the moment Olivia Shaw looked at him in that courtroom and said, "You did the right thing." The official envelope had arrived 3 days later. No return address, just a Department of Defense seal and a time, a date, and a temporary clearance pass. No ceremony name, no instructions, just a line at the bottom. "You are invited to witness a commendation of national importance." Inside the Pentagon's secured South Wing, a small auditorium had been arranged. It held no more than 50 chairs, each occupied by someone who seemed to belong, not in title but in demeanor. Quiet strength, military bearing, people who had seen things and kept them to themselves. There were no reporters, no cameras, no press kits. Only silence and the faint scent of polished wood and coffee. At precisely 0900, a door at the far end opened. A 2-star general stepped onto the stage and approached the podium. His voice, though measured, carried authority that filled the room. "Today we gather not to celebrate, but to acknowledge. What you're about to witness will not be shared with the public, printed in history books, or referenced in speeches. But it will be remembered here by those who understand the cost of silence." Ray leaned forward slightly. "Lieutenant Colonel Olivia Shaw," the general said, front and center. Olivia stepped from the side of the room, dressed in a deep blue formal uniform. Not a wrinkle on her jacket, no hesitation in her step. She looked different from the woman Ray had seen handcuffed in court, but no less composed, perhaps even more so. As she stood before the podium, the general continued. "For actions carried out under Operation Blind Front, involving 13 months of isolated fieldwork, 2 deep cover infiltrations, and the neutralization of 6 embedded threats across 3 states, the Department of Defense hereby awards you the Distinguished Service Commendation, Black Star designation." The words landed heavily in the room. Ray didn't know the medal by sight, but the reaction of the room told him enough. This wasn't just decoration, it was recognition for a mission so sensitive its name wouldn't exist on record. As the medal was pinned to Olivia's uniform, she held her gaze steady. No pride, no swelling music, only quiet acknowledgement. After the ceremony, attendees stood in hushed conversation. Most drifted out quickly, as if trained not to linger. Ray remained seated, unsure if he should leave. That's when he heard her voice. "You clean up well, Ray." He turned to see Olivia standing beside him, still in uniform, hands clasped behind her back. That same calm in her eyes, but this time softened by something that almost resembled warmth. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. Ray stood. "I didn't think I'd get past the front gate." She smiled faintly. "You were always on the list. You just didn't know it." They stepped aside into a quiet hallway overlooking the Potomac. "You were never just running a range," she said, folding her arms. "We'd identified Pine Hollow years ago as a potential civilian node. Low visibility, clear sight lines, consistent operator behavior. But what kept it valuable was you." Ray raised a brow. "Me? Your instincts, your discretion. You never asked the wrong questions, and you never ignored the right signals. You noticed what others missed. You made a call when it mattered, and didn't panic when things went sideways." Ray exhaled slowly. So you've been watching me. Let's just say we had contingency plans in place if you hadn't made that call. She paused. But you did. They stood in silence for a moment, the muffled hum of Pentagon operations echoing behind them. What happens now? Ray asked. Olivia glanced down the hallway, then back at him. Now, that depends. If you're willing, we could use someone like you, not in uniform, not in the field, but in observation, vetting, quiet places, quiet people, just like you did with me. Ray chuckled dryly. Thought I was retired. You are, but some retirements are more flexible than others. He looked out the window, thinking of the snow-covered lanes back at Pine Hollow, of how many times he had thought his days of service were over. Maybe not. Maybe some kinds of duty never end. They just change shape. I'll think about it, he said finally. I know you will, she replied, already walking away. Before she turned the corner, she looked back one last time. And Ray, thank you for seeing what others didn't. Then she was gone. But Ray stood still a while longer. Hands in his pockets, the weight of the morning sinking in. He had come here expecting to witness a moment. Instead, he had been invited into something much larger. Something he hadn't known he was already part of. It had been 4 months since Ray Boone stood in that quiet Pentagon hallway, listening to Olivia Shaw invite him into a world he never thought he'd touch again. At first, he went back to his routine. Coffee at 5:30 a.m., unlock the range by 6, check the gravel for fresh tire tracks. It was the same rhythm he'd held for years, but something had changed, not around him but within. Because now he knew. He knew that the world didn't run the way it looked, that some people didn't carry IDs not because they were hiding, but because they were protecting something bigger than themselves. And that a quiet shooting range nestled in the Colorado foothills could be more than a pastime for weekend hunters. It could be a doorway. Then one morning in late spring, an unmarked package arrived. No name, no sender. Inside was a sleek, black, hard case no larger than a lunchbox. Nestled within foam lining were several items: a military-grade spotting scope with thermal overlay, a compact digital recording device, a card the size of a dog tag etched with a string of encrypted numbers, and a burner phone. No instructions. Just a folded note. For when the ordinary looks too perfect, OS. Ray stared at it for a long while, then slowly closed the case. It wasn't dramatic. There was no ceremony, no contract to sign, but he understood exactly what it meant. He was in. The next few weeks came with quiet changes. He received encrypted messages on the burner. Nothing long, nothing elaborate. Just pings, confirmations, lists of dates and names. Each time a different visitor would arrive at Pine Hollow within a few days. Most looked like weekend marksmen. Some brought high-end equipment, others just curiosity and a borrowed rifle. But Ray watched. Not their aim, their habits, their stances, how they handled wind, how they scanned their surroundings when they thought no one was looking. Some were nothing, others were definitely something. He recorded only when necessary, short clips stored to the drive, uploaded by satellite relay from a transmitter buried under his office. The burner phone remained silent unless the system flagged a pattern worth reviewing. Occasionally, a contact would respond with just a phrase: pattern confirmed, no action. Or, possible candidate, maintain observation. Ray didn't ask for more. That wasn't his role. He didn't need to know what came next. All he had to do was watch. It reminded him of his days in the field, on Overwatch assignments, long hours of silence, 1,000 moving parts hiding behind stillness. He thought he had left that part of his life behind. But maybe this was exactly where he belonged. One afternoon, while adjusting the new scope under the fading sun, he glanced out at Lane 12, the same spot where Olivia Shaw had stood months earlier, and smiled. That lane had become something else now. A checkpoint, a proving ground. And he was no longer just a caretaker of a dusty old range. He was a gatekeeper. A silent first line of defense in a war the public would never see. And if someone extraordinary walked through that gate again, Ray would be ready, It was a Tuesday afternoon in mid-June, the kind of day when the wind was light and the sun hung just warm enough to make the pine needles shimmer along the ridge. Ray Boone was finishing up maintenance on the east firing lanes when he noticed a silver sedan pull quietly into the gravel lot. He watched out of habit, eyes narrowing under the brim of his cap. A young woman stepped out, mid-20s, maybe younger. She wore jeans, a windbreaker, and a navy ball cap with a college shooting team logo stitched on the side. Nothing flashy, her rifle case looked standard. Her walk was casual. But something in the way she moved, deliberate, balanced, just a little too fluid, sent a flicker of memory through Ray's chest. It wasn't just how she walked, it was what she didn't do. She didn't hesitate, didn't check for posted rules, didn't ask for lane assignment. She headed straight for the farthest shooting position, lane 12. The same lane Olivia had used. Ray didn't stop her. He just stepped into the shadows of the observation booth, lifting the new thermal scope to his eye as she unpacked her rifle. She moved like someone trained to be invisible. Her weapon was a bolt-action model, civilian legal but custom assembled. The bolt was polished, trigger-tuned, barrel floated. She ran her fingers over the optic with the same reverence a surgeon might show a scalpel. Then, without adjusting for elevation or dialing windage, she sent her first round downrange. Clang. Dead center at 500 yards. She chambered another, fired again. Clang. Then she did something that made Ray's stomach drop. Without checking instruments or wind flags, she adjusted her angle by 5 degrees and fired at a steel silhouette positioned nearly 900 yards out. A gust of wind hit the treetops, but her bullet struck true. He lowered the scope slowly, exhaling. No student marksman made that kind of call. Not unless they'd been taught how to feel the wind, not just read it. He waited until she was packing up. Then, as she walked past the range office, he stepped outside with a smile. "Impressive shooting," he said casually. She nodded, polite but distant. "Thanks, I'm part of a university team. Just trying to stay sharp over the summer." Ray smiled lightly. Most college shooters don't use wind correction without instruments. A pause, subtle. Her eyes met his just for a second too long. Not startled, just recalculating. "Guess I got lucky," she said, then offered a practice shrug. He didn't press, didn't need to. She walked back to her car, engine humming to life a moment later. Ray waited until her taillights vanished around the curve before returning to the office. He opened the drawer beneath the register and pulled out the black burner phone. He dialed a number only a few people in the country even knew existed. A click, then a neutral voice. Identification? Ray didn't hesitate. Boone, observation node Pine Hollow. Go ahead. Female, early 20s, claims to be university shooter. Movement and adjustment patterns suggest covert training. Wind response without gear. Rifle is precision assembled. A brief silence on the line, then a response. Acknowledged. Candidate is in final phase of field assessment. Maintain normal operations. No engagement necessary. Ray nodded even though no one could see. She wasn't just a shooter. She was the next one. 3 mornings after the young woman left the range, a package arrived on Ray Boone's front porch. No delivery truck, no knock at the door, just a black hard case, dusted faintly with pine pollen, sitting beside the mat like it had grown there overnight. Tucked beneath the handle was a handwritten note on crisp stationery. "For your eyes only," from an old friend. Ray took it inside without a word. He set it gently on the workbench in the back of the range office and opened the latches. Inside was a brand new thermal imaging scope, military grade, with dual-mode infrared and a proprietary lens housing he'd only ever seen once, years ago, in a Pentagon vault. Below it sat a palm-sized encryption module, already linked to a satellite relay system. No buttons, no manual, just plug, point, observe. There was nothing else in the case except a small envelope. Ray opened it. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. The handwriting was unmistakable, tight, clean, controlled. He read the words once, then again. "Some of us are always around. You just don't see us unless you know how to look. Oh. He stood still for a long moment, the late morning light stretching in stripes across the floor. The words weren't just a farewell, they were a trust passed forward. Ray looked out the window at lane 12, the grass neatly trimmed, the steel silhouettes standing like quiet sentinels under the trees. He understood now. This range wasn't just for sport anymore. It had become a waypoint, a quiet sanctuary at the edge of the visible world, a place where those who moved in shadows could pause, breathe, recalibrate, where people like Olivia Shaw and the young woman with the college cap and eyes that missed nothing could come and train without drawing attention. And he was no longer just the man behind the counter. He was the one watching the watchers, the silent keeper of the in-between. Ray mounted the new scope atop his tower post that evening. It hummed gently as it powered on, scanning the woods with invisible precision. He didn't need fanfare, didn't need medals or briefings. Just clarity. Just quiet. And maybe, now and then, someone would show up claiming to be a hobbyist or a student, lining up a shot with fingers too steady and eyes too sharp. And when they did, he'd know exactly what to do. Ray Boone, once just a retired Marine running a sleepy shooting range, had become the guardian of something far greater. A sliver of light in a world full of shadows. And as he poured himself a cup of coffee and settled into the watchtower, he smiled faintly, because he knew in the deepest part of himself that Olivia was right. Some of them are always around. You just have to know how to look. In the quiet that followed, Ray Boone's story leaves us with more than a tale of hidden missions and silent warriors. It offers a reminder that some of the most important roles in life don't come with titles or recognition. Sometimes the person who makes the difference isn't the one standing in the spotlight, but the one standing just behind it, watching carefully, acting quietly, protecting what matters without ever needing applause. This story speaks to something deeper, that purpose doesn't disappear with age, and service doesn't always end when the uniform comes off. Ray wasn't recruited because of his rank or his resume. He was trusted because of who he was when no one was watching. His calm judgment, sharp intuition, and quiet strength made him the kind of person others could rely on, even in matters of national security. For many of us, especially in our later years, it's easy to feel like the world has moved on without us. But Ray's story reminds us that wisdom, vigilance, and integrity are timeless qualities. They matter as much today as they did in the past. You may no longer wear the badge, the stripes, or the title, but your experience, your eyes, your sense of right and wrong still hold value. And sometimes it's those qualities that make all the difference, whether in your family, your community, or in unexpected moments when someone simply needs to be seen. So if you've ever wondered whether your best days are behind you, let this story remind you. Sometimes the quietest people are doing the loudest kind of good. Thank you for joining me today. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you think, please don't forget to like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more powerful, untold stories like this one. And don't forget to click the bell icon so you won't miss the next episode, because the next story might be even closer to home than you think. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep watching.